Talking about family, again, one of the problems I imagine of the high performers that you deal with is the sacrifices they've had to make personally to achieve the successes that they've wanted professionally. What have you learned about choosing, developing, and maintaining a healthy relationship with your significant other?
First thing I would say is a red flag is a red flag, and if you think it's a green flag, you might spend 20 years of your life dealing with the mess.
What do you mean by that?
Well, how many of us have entered into a relationship where we saw the red flags right at the beginning? Intimately as well as in business. They were right there. But we're nice people, and we hope for the best. I think hoping for the best without paying attention to reality is a recipe for misery. And I didn't mean that to rhyme, but I think it's true. So when a red flag shows itself in a relationship, pay attention to it and wish that person well, love them from afar. But remember, one of the chapters in Wealth Money Can't Buy, your choice of mate is 90% of your joy. And I think that is so true. And when our home life is doing well and stable and peaceful, and we're not full of drama, watch what happens to, you know this, watch what happens to your mental focus, your creativity, your productivity, your relationships at work. So I would say a red flag is a red flag. Don't think it's green. I'd say your choice of mate is 90% of your joy. And then one of the chapters is ask the 10,000 dinners question. I know you're from the UK, and Ayesha Vardag is one of the UK's top divorce lawyers. She represents a lot of the footballers and movie stars and multi-billionaires. And she was asked in the Financial Times, Chris, you've seen a lot of relationships fall apart. What are your relationship lessons for a good relationship? And number one, she said, separate bedrooms seems to work very well. And the second thing she said was 10,000 dinners. And the interviewer said, 10,000 dinners, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, looks fade, lust dissolve. But if you see yourself having 10,000 dinners with that person, hold them close and fight for the love, because great love is hard to find. So what I'm saying there is find someone. I don't believe opposites attract.
Why?
I believe, well, there's this, again, there's many ways to do this, but in my experience, I find when someone has different values and there's incompatibilities because they're opposite, then there's a lot of negotiating. Like, you've got to do what they want to do, and then right now, my life partner, Elle, we just love so many of the same things. So a great evening for us is home chatting and reading. We see the world through a similar set of lenses. There's very little drama. So there's not a lot of negotiating. We just love living life with one another. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's really very wonderful. So I don't think opposites attract. And I would, there's this idea, universes collide. Find someone where universes collide. I'd rather have universes collide in the most serene, stable, loving way. That's how I'd like universes collide. So I think find someone who sees the world the way you see the world, and it creates a lot less drama. And that brings me to another through line in the book, which is you can change the world or be around toxic people, but you don't get to do both. And I want to go to some science here from Nicholas Christakis at Harvard University. And what he's realized is we are influenced not only by our friends, but by the friends of our friends and the friends of our friends' friends. And we could get into the science on that. It's mirror neurons, which cause us to mimic the people around us, and emotional contagion, which is the phenomenon where subconsciously we adopt the dominant emotions of the people we spend most of our time with. And so if we allow energy vampires and dream stealers into our days, into our companies, into our home lives, over time, it dramatically degrades our creativity, our productivity, our happiness, and our serenity. So doing an energy vampire detox, let's call it, is really extraordinarily powerful. And I always hear people say, well, that person is my mother or whoever. I would say, well, then practice selective association. Maybe don't text them 3 times a day, do it once a week. But in some cases, maybe it's a personal relationship. Maybe it's a friend. You talked about it. If you're on a path of growth, very few people are on a path of growth. Friends who were your friends a few years ago might not vibe with you anymore. They might be bringing you down. You've got to let them go, or you could let them go. I would say love them from afar.
Yeah, it's difficult with the family thing. I guess maybe in some ways I'm blessed. I'm an only child and I've got mum and dad. So for me, the number of dice rolls that could have potentially thrown up a grenade in my life, I only had 2. As long as mum and dad were great, which they were and are, I don't have that. But I understand that for people with bigger families, you've got 5 brothers and sisters and a ton of close aunties and uncles, and Uncle Jim is always causing havoc, and it's a nightmare at Christmas and it's a nightmare at Thanksgiving, and you always there's phone calls and there's police calls and all the rest of it. That's tough. I in some ways wish that family was a bigger part of my life, but in other ways I can see how it can be a total curse as well as a blessing for people.
I totally agree with you. One thing, my father is going to be 87 in a few weeks. And as I put more years under my belt, I do realize how powerful family is. And, your parent, I've got great parents. You realize your parents and your family does their best. And I think it brings you an absolutely great source of joy. And that's why it's the 3rd form of wealth. And if it's not family, it's friends. We live in a world right now where we chase 20,000 digital friends. But I believe if you have 3 great friends, you're a very rich person indeed. 3 friends where when you see them after a few years, you start on the last sentence after you saw them last time. 3 friends where you can be yourself and they still love you. 3 friends where you're down on your knees and they're there for you. 3 friends where you're in trouble in a foreign country and you call them at 3 a.m. and they say, hey, hang on for a second, Chris, I'm going to be on the next plane. That's a currency I think that money can't buy.
Talk to me about this confusion between attachment and love.
Well, I think there's a huge difference. I think attachment is born of fear. I think attachment is coming from a place where you don't love yourself enough, so you can't be alone. Blaise Pascal said, the French mathematician said, most of a human being's miseries derive from their inability to sit quietly in a room with themselves. If you haven't done the inner work required to be comfortable in your own skin, then you're going to be attached to filling your life not only with relationship partners that make you feel better about yourself, but other drugs of choice, whether it's alcohol, whether it's digital toys, whether it's material things. So attachment, I believe, is coming from a place of fear. Love is very different. Love is not needy. Love is truly wanting the best for the other person. Love is secure. Love is stable. Love is grounding.